When we were traipsing about in Seattle for PAX West 2019, we had the opportunity to play a game of Ultimate Werewolf with our good friends from Outside Xbox and Outside Extra, which you may have already seen on the channel and will be available to watch via a lovely card that should be appearing on screen about now.
Well, that got us hungry for some more deception, intrigue, and generally just lying to our friends. So here's 6 great hidden role games in which you can do just that.
We've already talked about Werewolf, so guess we may as well start with that. Ultimate Werewolf is one of many incarnations of hidden role game Mafia, which has been wildly popular in American universities, and indeed worldwide, since about 1986. In Werewolf, one character acts as the moderator, or GM, while everybody else plays as an inhabitant of a village that is, rather unfortunately, infested with werewolves. Each person will be given a card denoting which camp they fall into. In the daytime, the inhabitants discuss who might be a werewolf and who is probably an innocent villager, eventually making formal accusations and, after a bit more debate, voting on whether or not to kill the accused. If the accused is killed, they reveal their card and, depending on whether or not the last werewolf has been caught, the game continues. In the night phase, the werewolf or werewolves wake up and secretly elect a player to murder as they sleep, thereby reducing the number of innocent villagers and increasing the werewolf's chance of winning. Traditionally, there are other roles in the game, like the Seer, who once a night can select a player and find out whether or not they are a werewolf, but the deluxe version has a total of 36 different roles, allowing for a frankly intimidating number of different combinations and a whole lot of finger pointing. And of course, there's also Blood on the Clock Tower, but we haven't played that one yet, damn it, so we can't recommend it. But anyway, there's a reason Werewolf or Mafia or whatever you'd like to call it has endured for so long, and that's because it's fun to have everybody around the room trying to solve the same deadly, convoluted mystery, especially when you don't know who you can trust or whether saying the right thing at the wrong time might wind up getting you killed. And sure, you and your friends might have played it to death, but it's a classic for a reason. And quite frankly, I don't want to play Werewolf is exactly the sort of thing a werewolf might say to lull everybody into a false sense of security. You traitor, I'm onto you.
News has just come in from top brass that the mob have infiltrated our precinct, and at least one of yous is a Mafia rat. In Good Cop, Bad Cop, 4 to 8 players will be trying to root out the Mafia corruption in their police department, or, if they're so inclined, they might just be trying to further it instead. Your group will be secretly divided into 2 teams, cops and crooks, which will be decided by these 3 cards in front of you. If you've got more honest cards than you have crooked, then you're a good guy. If you have more crooked cards than you have honest, then you're a stinking crook. 2 players around the table, though, will find the agent and kingpin cards in their set of 3, which will override the other 2 cards and set you up as the leaders of the 2 teams. When everyone's got their roles, your objective is simple: kill the enemy team leader. Once they've been shot twice, the other team brings home the bacon. On your turn, you'll be able to do one of 4 things. Your main action will be investigating your fellow police officers to try and guess their allegiance. Simply pick up one of their 3 integrity cards that were discussed earlier and look at it secretly. That will give you a snippet of evidence as to their allegiance. Your second most important action, though, is arming yourself and shooting. At the center of the table are a number of guns waiting to be held by whomever can grab them first. To get one, you'll have to reveal a part of your integrity, but they also put you in the driving seat when it comes to negotiations. The smart thing about these firearms is that you have to aim each of them at another player at the end of your turn. You can't just have it holstered and play neutral to the last second, which turns the whole game into a real Mexican standoff. If you change your mind about who you'd like to shoot, you have to wait until the entire table has had a turn before you get the chance to fire again, because taking aim only happens at the end of your turn. The tension this game creates is palpable, but it's also very, very silly. That silliness is helped along by these equipment cards, which you can grab in the same vein as the guns in the center of the table. You could use a taser to steal another player's gun. You could use a flashbang to shuffle your own integrity cards, ruining everyone else's picture of your allegiance. or use some planted evidence to completely reverse a player's honest and crooked cards, potentially having them swap sides halfway through the game. You could even use that to bounce onto the enemy team that are just about to win at the last possible moment. There's even a rule where if one of the team leaders can become both Kingpin and Agent simultaneously, they win the game and everyone else loses. It's such good fun, and it deserves a place on your table.
Mafia Cuba is a game about trying to do something nice for your friends, only to discover that pretty much all of them are traitors and crooks. It's also a game I forgot to bring into the office. Sorry. In this game of interrogation, deduction and deception, one player takes on the role of Don Alessandro, head of the Cuban Mafia, and everyone else plays as his loyal subjects. Now, as the story goes, Don Alessandro is having a lovely meeting with his little band of mafiosos when he steps out of the room for a moment, leaving his cigar box in the hands of his compadres. Now, this cigar box, it should be noted, has a false bottom and is absolutely stuffed with diamonds, and, as it goes around the room, the loyalty of each of the players will be tested. They have to take something, but will they stay true to the Godfather, or will they turn traitor and pick his pocket? The exact contents of the box changes depending on the number of players, which can range from 6 to 12, but most commonly you can expect to find the following. First, a quantity of diamonds. If you take even one of these, you become a thief and are officially playing against the Godfather. Your job is to sow suspicion and confusion among all the players, because if the Godfather fails in their attempt to get all the diamonds back, and you have more diamonds than any other player, you'll win. Next, there are some white chips. Taking a white chip means you are a loyal henchman. You're working with the Godfather to recover the diamonds, so it's in your interest to offer truthful and helpful information when asked, and to point out when the claims of your fellow players don't quite add up. The green chip, meanwhile, is the driver chip. When you take this, you're throwing your fate in with the player to your right. So if that player is a thief, you're on the thief's side. If they're a henchman, you're working with the Godfather. You win if the person to your right wins. Your job then is to work out where your loyalty lies and play accordingly. There's also the blue chip. This chip means you're an FBI agent. Ideally, you want to be suspicious enough that the Godfather will accuse you of being a thief, because if they do so, your sting operation is successful, the game immediately ends, and you are the sole winner. And finally, sometimes the box will come to you with absolutely nothing in it at all. At this point, you still have to pretend to take something and put it in your pocket, but you are in fact playing as a penniless, adorable urchin. Urchins play on the side of the thieves. They just don't have any money to show for it, which is kind of lame. So anyway, those are the roles people will be playing around the table, and I think you can agree the odds are quite often stacked up against the Godfather. So how do they go about getting their diamonds back without making a false accusation and losing the game? The Godfather's only power is to interrogate. Players don't have to tell the truth, but if you keep asking the right questions of your players, you can quickly construct a good idea of who's telling the truth and who's a big Porky Fibbington. You, Jenna the Gun, what was in the box when it came to you? How many diamonds exactly? Hey you, Stealing Frank, what did you take? A henchman chip? But Jenna the Gun said there weren't any henchman chips in the box when it came to her. How come one magically appeared when it came into your hands? Jimmy the Snitch, how many diamonds were in the box when it came to you? I might have known. Stealing Frank? Turn out your pockets. Now, if all goes well for the Godfather, all the diamonds will be recovered and the treacherous thieves will end up swimming with the fishes. If the Godfather makes the wrong accusation, however, or accusations plural if there are lots of people playing, then their reign as Don is over. Either they've been overthrown by the thieves, or worse, they've been collared by the feds and they're looking at a life behind bars. Either way, the winner gets applauded, the losers get a pat on the back, everything goes back in the box, and it all starts over again with a new Don. Mafia Cuba is really simple to pick up, has tremendous replay value, and does a great job of testing how well everybody can think on their feet. More importantly though, there's just something that never gets old about seeing the Godfather open up the cigar box and realise just how thoroughly they've been robbed. It's equally thrilling and amusing, and to be honest, it's one of my first go-to games in any scenario with a large number of players. I beg you to try it.
God, there sure is a lot of corruption in police departments, isn't there? Or at least that's what Deception Murder in Hong Kong would have you believe. Bad news, there's been a murder, and this time it's not a werewolf, but one of your fellow detectives. Despicable. With the help of a mute forensic scientist, hopefully you'll be able to root them out and bring them to justice. Much like most of the other games on this list, at the start of the game everyone will be given a role card. There's some extra roles that you can add in to spice things up, but in a basic game you'll either be a normal detective or the murderer. But you might also be the forensic scientist. The scientist will be unable to torture the rest of the group, as they'll know exactly who the murderer is, kind of like the game master in Werewolves, except in this, you'll actually be able to play yourself as well. Everyone around the table but the scientist will be given a badge and 8 teeny tiny cards, half in red, half in blue. The red cards are bits of evidence that might tie you to the crime, and the blue cards are potential murder weapons that your character had access to. Once everyone's got their roles and evidence in front of them, the group will close their eyes, save for the murderer and scientist. The murderer will then choose one card of each colour that will be the key pieces of evidence and murder weapon that link them to the crime. Once the game commences, it's the job of all the other detectives to figure out not only who the murderer is, but also which 2 cards were selected. Conversely, the murderer will be working to push suspicion away from their set of cards and towards the other players instead. So how do the detectives, well, deduce? What are they looking for and how do they find it? That is where the forensic scientist comes back into play. Although they're not allowed to torture the rest of the group, they are allowed to provide the details of the case. But what are the details of the case? Well, that's down to the scientist to decide. Using the 2 cards selected by the murderer, they must now construct a crime in their heads that link those 2 objects together. Then, using these literally bullet-pointed cards, they'll select from a few options to build up a case. Where did the crime take place? How did they die? Did the murderer and victim know each other? Was there some kind of loud sound or a message left? With these building blocks, your detectives can slowly start constructing a case, sometimes not quite in the direction that you want them to, but by adding and removing some of the cards on the display each round, the forensic scientist can push the other players towards or away from correct or incorrect trains of thought. This game really lets you walk in the shoes of Arthur Conan Doyle or Agatha Christie as you draw on pieces of evidence to fill in the gaps and put pressure on your opponents who are standing uncomfortably close to a lot of damning evidence. The game will start to add in different elements as you scale up to larger groups as well. Perhaps the murderer has an accomplice who can help to draw attention away from the real murderer. Or the detectives might have a witness who knows the identity of the murderer but must inform the rest of the group without exposing themselves lest they're taken care of before the murderer can be brought to justice.
Now, it should go without saying that we think all of the games on this list are pretty special. Otherwise, well, we wouldn't be talking about them. But if there's one thing they all have in common, it's that they're fairly rinse and repeat. Fast-paced games aimed at getting people shouting at one another before a big reveal and a quick reset. Not so with Lifeboat. It's still a game of deception, betrayal, and underhand dealings, but it's also a narrative epic, and, most importantly, it's a game you can win as a corpse. In Lifeboat, 4 to 6 people are cast adrift in a small boat. They sit in single file. At the front is a box or deck of provisions from which items, or cards, are drawn. These items can include useful things for staying alive like water, a life preserver, or a flare gun, but they can also include things like bundles of cash, or jewels, or paintings. Bit rubbish when you're in a survival situation, but if you're the richest player when you make it back to land, you'll be the winner. Anyway, once provisions are drawn, players take it in turns to pick an item from the pile before passing it back along the line. So the further forward in the boat you are, the better the items. Must be rubbish to be right at the back of the boat then, yes? Well, no, not quite, because while being at the front makes you the quartermaster, being at the back makes you the navigator. Each turn you get to look at a number of cards from the navigation deck and decide which ones are discarded and which one card comes to pass. Given navigation cards determine who will stay safe, who will become thirsty, and who will be pitched overboard, it gives you a tremendous amount of power over the rest of the crew. But why might you want to pitch someone over the side of the ship, I hear you ask? Well, it's simple. There's one person on board the lifeboat you're in love with, and there's another person you hate. If your beloved is alive when you reach dry land, you receive points, but get this, if the person you hate has snuffed it, you get points for that as well, and all of these roles are entirely secret. On your go, you can row toward land, mug somebody for an item, do nothing, or demand that somebody swap seats with you, starting a fist fight if they refuse. As you might expect then, it's a pretty turbulent game, and you can naturally expect at least one of the lifeboat's inhabitants to be thoroughly dead before you sight land. However, as I mentioned before, my favourite thing about Lifeboat is that death isn't necessarily the end of your bid for victory. If the lifeboat reaches land with your corpse aboard, and said corpse happens to have more valuables on it than anybody else, then congratulations! You've won! Of course, you have to be in the boat to win. If a navigation card tips you overboard after your untimely demise, you'll sink to the bottom of the ocean along with all your carefully gathered riches. Lifeboat then is a chaotic game about being quite mean to almost all of your friends. Come for the jaunty theme and whimsical art style, stay for the looks of betrayal your fellow players shoot you when you deliberately chuck them overboard and then throw a bucket of chum into the water so they get attacked by sharks. Lovely.
Bang the Dice game has a lot of similarities to Good Cop, Bad Cop. You're divided into teams, you're shooting people. On the surface, it might just look like a cowboy version of the same game, but Bang mixes things up by adding new bits to the formula, including some rogue elements of random chance and neutral characters. Just like your time in the police precinct, you'll be divided up into two small teams, and one of those will have a special character. The sheriff will lead a team of deputies in trying to eradicate all the criminals around them. The outlaws will just have to work together to kill just the sheriff. However, one or two players in the group will be playing as the renegades, solely out for themselves in an attempt to be the last man standing in this gun-slinging showdown out in the Wild West. Renegades have by far the most difficult and convoluted path to difficulty. They'll need to take out everyone but the sheriff, keeping the head honcho themselves alive till the very end, so that they can then take them down themselves in an epic showdown and be crowned the victor. Because the renegades have no real allegiance, they have this sort of neutral spanner in the works that can mess things up for other teams. They'll begin the game siding with one of the other factions, pretending to help as they heal the sheriff or help take down the deputies. As time goes on though, their allegiances will shift with whoever holds the top seat at the time, being careful not to expose themselves as a renegade. It adds a bit of chaos to the tried and true basic formula of having two teams who don't know who they are. That's not the only way that Bang can mix things up though. Instead of simply choosing your actions for the turn, you'll be playing a miniature push your luck game with this set of dice. To target other players around the table, for example, you might use these numerical things, adding up their values together to shoot that many spaces away. Roll a set of 3 of these Gatling gun symbols and you can choose everyone around the table to shoot instead. Beers will allow you to heal dealt damage, and you can pass them to other players as well to show your loyalty. Sheriff? It's not all gun and games though. Roll an arrow and you'll draw the ire of the Native Americans, who are quite rightly annoyed at you for causing a right kerfuffle right in the middle of their homelands, which you're not even supposed to be in the first place. Once the last arrow token is taken from the supply, everyone around the table will take damage for every single arrow they're holding. The final symbol on the dice is a stick of dynamite, and if you manage to roll 3 of those, you just straight up explode. You just blow up. Your turn's over, you take some damage and pass on the dice. You can re-roll anything that you're not keen on a couple of times to try and fudge the results, but arrows are instantly given to you, and dynamite cannot be re-rolled, so push it too far and you'll be out of the game before you know it. Bang is a hell of a lot of fun. I recommend popping on the Red Dead Redemption soundtrack and role-playing the hell out of it with some cowboy accents across the board. You'll also get given a unique character, each with their own special power, which can inform you further of the kind of person to roleplay as. Chardonnay.
And there you have it, 6 hidden role games for you to try out if you fancy lying to your friends and generally betraying them. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, there are loads more from Dicebreaker for you to watch. Some of them should be on screen now, so do give one of those a click. Do like, subscribe, ring the bell icon for notifications so you don't miss anything else from us, but most importantly, thank you very much for watching and have a lovely day.